Okay, so once I had the idea, the concept of lions and bears down, I had the messaging at least in my heart. I go, now I need to make this as tangible as possible for you guys. And for you guys, there's obviously there's the believers, but then there's also people out there that want a great message. They want to stand behind something, and yet they may not necessarily be believers. And so I started to pick apart every aspect of the lion, the bear, David and Goliath, and I go, how can I make this tangible for both parties? And so I started to look at the story again of David and Goliath, and I go, what aspects of preparation did David have to put into overcoming and conquering the bear and the lion to be ready for David and Goliath? And that's where you get the 6 parts of the series coming up in no particular order. And these things, they almost became the lab motto and or mottos. And I will reiterate. Number 1 is purpose. That's the first episode, obviously, that we're going to talk about. And so I go, David, he was ready, and I tried to elaborate without going into detail too much because these are going to be episodes. And again, I'm working on the format. I think sound bites are easier for everybody in this day and age. The attention span is very small. So still working out the details, but it's going to be great. Be great content, some in there for everybody. Okay, so purpose. Purpose was the first one. I go, this was David's moment. This was his purpose to slay Goliath, which would ultimately prepare him to be king one day. And we know there were some challenges with the kingship, but that was ultimately what David was born to do. That was his purpose in life. 2 is training, repetition. Something you do over and over and over and over again, in blood and sweat and tears and over and failure and picking yourself back up, learning, experience. We don't know how many lions and bears he'd had to fight, if you will, but he was trained enough to where he felt like he could overcome Goliath in that moment. 3 is confidence. To me, confidence, true confidence, comes from knowing again that you can do something, regardless of how talented you feel that you are, or sometimes we try to compare ourselves to the next. I mean, David, he was so confident. He goes, I don't need anything. I don't need that armor. I don't need this weapon. This is what I'm comfortable with. I know this will work. And I think it's huge. I think that the more we can tap into our confidence, the better prepared we will be for a moment like this of our Goliath. So I started there, and that's 3 out of 6. And I go, what if I break it up into 2 perspectives? You got the Christian perspective, and then you have, I don't want to say world, but someone who may not be a believer. Respect and love. And so I go, that's the Christian perspective. Purpose, training, confidence. And then I started to think, okay, how could I package this concept to someone who wouldn't necessarily be a believer? So, and you guys have heard me use this phrase before, overcoming. That's 4. So we have to learn how to overcome whatever the challenge is, whatever the hurdle is, whatever the hardship is. If we can overcome, and a lot of this stuff is going to sound redundant and repetitive, which it's kind of meant to be that. It's all one concept. Is getting prepared for our moment in life that will prepare us for something else. So overcoming. And to have a trail of victories to look back to is powerful. They can be small victories, but small victories of overcoming, again, prepare you for something greater. And that leads to number 5, victories. I think sometimes we get caught up on this word because we think that it has to be some grandiose feat. Not necessarily, but overcoming leads to victories. And if you just have one, and I'm talking about anything, we can, again, I don't want to elaborate too much because these are all going to be episodes, but to be victorious in anything is enough. Now, good things, ultimately, we can be victorious in negative ways, but we're talking about things that help us change the world here. So small victories can lead up to a bigger victory. And then lastly is courage. Yeah, David was confident, but if there was a part of him that was afraid, his courage and his confidence overshadowed, in a good way, his fear. And that's what courage is. Doing something that you're afraid to do, despite the challenges, despite what we're feeling. Knowing that what needs to be done is way more important than our feelings, our emotions, and our challenges. And that feeling, that desire becomes more powerful. And as I thought 6 was a good number, by the way. Even number 7 obviously is the number of perfection. But I go 6 is good. Let's stop there. Got 3 for the believers, 3 from a non-Christian perspective. And I can start to elaborate on these things. And at this time, I had no idea I'd be doing a podcast. But the more that I think about it, now I go, this is just great. It's great material to give a message, to create an identity. And again, this is totally separate from the clothing aspect. But now I had a platform and a foundation because the clothes now can represent this message or these messages.